All right, students, this is your PowerPoint introducing you to Ludwig van Beethoven. And Beethoven is probably one of the most famous composer that ever lived. And he is responsible for bridging this music of the classic era into this new romantic era. Now, Beethoven didn't just write great music, he actually changed music. So what did he do to change things? Well, he expanded classic era forms. You took something like a Mozart symphony, which might have been 15, 20 minutes, while Beethoven needed more space to tell his particular story, so the Beethoven symphonies are 45 minutes, hour-long symphonies. He just needed more time to tell whatever musical story he was telling. Beethoven enlarged the orchestra. In Johann Sebastian Bach's day, the orchestra was maybe 9, 12 people. In Mozart's time, the orchestra might have been 30, 35. Beethoven really expanded the orchestra. He added new instruments to the orchestra, and he increased the size of the orchestra. He just needed more power, more musical power for his works. Beethoven added a chorus to the orchestra. He made the chorus actually part of the musical sound. So there's a difference between that and, say, Handel's Hallelujah chorus, where the orchestra and the choir are performing, but the orchestra is accompanying the choir. With Beethoven, he made the choir part of the sound. Beethoven introduced more drama and emotion into his music. The music of the Romantic era, which Beethoven gave birth to, is extremely passionate and emotional, much more so than anything from the Classic era. Beethoven changed the role of the artist from servant to creator. Before Beethoven, even a guy like Mozart was just a servant to royalty, doing what they were told to do. And as an example, you can read this on your time. Haydn, from the Classic era, had to fill out this contract, and these are all the things that Haydn had to do. And he had to, his compositions were not his. They belonged to the royalty. Beethoven, on the other hand, he said that he was just going to write music just to write music. Nobody was going to tell him what to do or how he was going to do it. Beethoven broke all traditional rules. Here's my Beethoven slide. You can take a look at what Beethoven says, where he establishes that an artist creates purely for art. So 3 stages of Beethoven's life. As a young man, as a teenager, he was definitely influenced by the Classic era, but he wanted to do things beyond that. In his middle period, we call it the heroic period, Beethoven produces these works that are definitely different than anything Mozart did. The Fifth Symphony comes in this period, and Beethoven is beginning to go deaf. He's becoming increasingly more difficult to hear anything. And finally, in his last era, his period of his life, Beethoven is completely deaf, couldn't hear anything, and his compositions become extremely experimental. And the Ninth Symphony, the famous Ode to Joy, is one of those pieces that he wrote completely deaf. Now, Beethoven's music, what are some characteristics? The music has an ebb and flow of tempos. The tempos are constantly changing, unlike the Classic era, where once the tempo started, it stayed in that tempo, which is why you didn't need a conductor for Mozart's music. The music has powerful crescendos, these unusual harmonies in the music. Beethoven loves putting soft, tender melodies right next to strong, heroic melodies. You'll hear that in the Fifth Symphony and the Pathetique Sonata, and his music was very emotional and dramatic. You're going to listen to the Fifth Symphony. Within the Fifth Symphony, the music has a constant ebb and flow of tempo throughout all the 4 movements. He uses trombones for the first time in a symphony. Nobody ever used trombones before. Something unusual about it, there is no break between the third and fourth movement. He just kind of has a little transition going from the one section to the other. And the piece begins in a very dark C minor and ends in a very bright, uplifting C major. You'll also hear a little snippet of the famous Ode to Joy, the Ninth Symphony. Um, he changes the traditional order of movements. In the classic era, your first movement, second movement, third movement, fourth movement had to be a certain way, and Beethoven just shuffled them around. He puts new instruments in there. There are ebb and flows and tempo. He adds, of course, to the orchestra. And when you hear the little snippet, remember that he composed it when he was completely deaf. So that is your intro to Beethoven on the PowerPoint. I hope you enjoy listening. Talk to you later.